This alphabetic text on the Tel Dan stele is concrete archaeological evidence of the historical House of David during the Iron Age. Yet this legacy masks a hidden corruption. David orchestrated the murder of a loyal soldier, Uriah, to cover up taking Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. For a monarch during this era, there is no higher court. No local magistrate has the jurisdiction to arrest a king, and no civilian jury can sit in judgment of a sovereign. This lack of oversight builds an internal echo chamber. Surrounded by subjects whose survival depends on their obedience, a leader begins to believe that a secret, if sufficiently buried, is no longer a threat. Unfettered power doesn't hide a leader's choices from themselves, but it does hide their vulnerability. It creates a false sense of security that requires an external, uncontrollable force to shatter. That force arrived through the prophet Nathan. Rather than leading with a direct accusation that the king could easily suppress, Nathan presented a fictional legal dispute for the king to resolve. He told the story of a wealthy man with massive flocks who refused to kill his own livestock to feed a guest. Instead, the rich man seized a poor neighbor's single, deeply loved ewe lamb and slaughtered it for the meal. The reaction from the throne was instantaneous. David's sense of justice was most piercing when he was looking at someone else. He immediately decreed a death sentence for the fictional rich man. As the highlight moves through this path, you see how a narrative about a third party circumvents the subject's ego. By the time it reaches the final judgment, David had already condemned the act before realizing he committed it. Our ability to judge others is often a leader's greatest blind spot. It is the moment when they are most objective about the law that they are most vulnerable to their own conviction. The trap closed with 4 words. Nathan mapped the parable directly onto the king with the indictment, "You are the man." Normally, a monarch in the ancient Near East would respond to such a public humiliation by executing the prophet to preserve his image and maintain his grip on the throne. Instead, David offered an immediate confession without any attempt to shift blame. He simply stated, "I have sinned against the Lord." Real change begins only when a person stops using their status as a shield and accepts full personal responsibility for the damage they have caused. This admission leads to a sharp paradox. Nathan immediately declares that God has taken away David's sin and that his life will be spared. Within this legal framework, the pardon is massive. Both murder and adultery were capital offenses, yet the king is spared the death penalty he just prescribed for the man in the story. This is the definition of unmerited grace, a spiritual ledger wiped clean, regardless of the offender's inability to repair the lives they broke. But while the spiritual debt is forgiven, the physical world still reacts to the initial action. The king is left to face the approaching shockwave of his own choices. The first consequence was intimate and devastating. Nathan warned that the child born from David's union with Bathsheba would fall ill and die. David's response was visceral. He abandoned his royal duties, fasting and sleeping on the ground for 7 days in a desperate attempt to plead for the child's life. Despite his mourning, the prophecy was fulfilled. The loss of the child marked the beginning of a generational curse. Nathan's promise that violence would never depart from David's family line. Forgiveness does not cut the chain of cause and effect. Our failures inevitably echo outward, often striking those who had no part in the original choice. The focus moves rapidly away from the king's private mourning chamber, expanding the scope of the fallout to the entire nation. While the king mourned in Jerusalem, his army was still locked in a brutal siege of the Ammonite capital, Rabbah. This was the exact location where Uriah was originally left to die on the front lines. David's hidden sin had now fully bled into the national destiny. His personal choices had forced an entire army to remain in a state of perpetual warfare. This is the dual reality of the story, a profound capacity for mercy existing alongside a cycle of expanding disciplinary justice. Accountability means navigating both. It is the act of accepting the radical gift of forgiveness while still carrying the weight of a world we have fractured.